All right, let's take a look at this. We're going to talk about Omicron again. Um, really, just because it's about over from what I can see. I'm not making any solid statements here, but we'll let these articles do some of the talking. So in China, where the virus originated from, you can argue that all you want and say it's racist. It originated from China. In China, China tests 2 million in Beijing and it lifts the COVID lockdown. Okay. So if they're already testing and seeing that they can lift the lockdowns because it's not that bad, that's an amazing indicator. Okay. Is anybody else doing that? UK lifts testing requirements for vaccinated travelers and abolishes quarantine rule for unvaccinated ones. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we can kind of look at China, obviously, Israel, the UK, and kind of see what's ahead of us as it heads this way. So it looks like things are lightening up. Hopefully, we can get rid of some of our restrictions and whatnot here. Let's look at another one. France to ease restrictions. Austrian parliament approves mandatory vaccination as it happened. Let's see. And it gives a cool little timeline down here of all kinds of stuff. But that's cool. France is starting to ease restrictions too. I wonder what we're doing here in America. The FDA halts use of antibody drugs that don't work versus Omicron. All right, not a doctor, disclaimer, okay? But the how do you say it? Is it monoclonal antibodies or something like that? Was a great treatment. It was approved under the as an emergency use. What is that? EUA, emergency use authorization. And now they're saying, oh, well, you know what? It doesn't work against Omicron, so we're going to take that off the shelves. Understand that like 90 something percent of the people that are getting COVID right now are getting Omicron, not 100. 90 something. So that means the other percentage is either getting Delta or some other kind of variant. Well, the antibodies work great against Delta from what I said. It didn't cure it, didn't stop it, but it was a great treatment. I think I can say that. It was a great treatment that was available, right, for Delta or the original, OG COVID or whatever. But instead of leaving that out there on the market, they're pulling it. I think that's a stupid thing to do. But if they're pulling that because it's not any good for Omicron, are they going to do anything with the vaccine? Because if we look right here, how effective are COVID-19 vaccines against Omicron? The pandemic has brought many tricky terms and ideas from epidemiology into everyone's lives. Two particularly complicated concepts of vaccines are efficacy and effectiveness. These are not the same thing, and as time goes on, and new variants like Omicron emerge, they are changing too. Now, this goes on to talk about what vaccines do, difference between efficacy and effectiveness. A lot of great stuff. When you have time, want to check it out, that's cool. How about this? What about the Omicron variant? The preliminary data about Omicron vaccines is coming in quickly, and it is revealing lower vaccine effectiveness. Best estimates suggest vaccines are around 30 to 40% effective at preventing infections and 70% effective at preventing severe disease. All right, so back up to last week's show, and maybe the one before that too when we talked about it. It is showing that the vaccines and the boosters have very little impact, if any, on Omicron, is what they're saying, what they are saying, not me, them. Okay. So they're saying it has very little impact on the Omicron. And what I mean by that, you may have less of a severe case, and they're really leaning on that what you run into is going to be significantly less severe if you have the vaccines or boosters or both or whatever. But as far as catching it and carrying it and spreading it, you can still do that even if you're fully vaccinated, even if you have natural immunity, even if you're boosted, right? So it's not working, but they're not taking the vaccines away. Isn't it interesting that something like the monoclonal antibodies, and again, I may be saying that wrong, monocloric maybe, but the antibodies, they're taking that away, but they're still pushing the vaccines and the boosters, even though clearly they're not working. It makes you wonder why. It makes you ask questions. And if it doesn't, then I think you're probably mindless. And you're just what was it? What's that dude from H3H3? Ethan Klein. You know, Steven Crowder poked at him for saying, you don't even have to think about it, bruh. You know, you just do what Fauci and they tell you to do. But I have a hard time believing people that are backed by, you know, pharmaceutical companies telling me what does and doesn't work. And specifically the pharmaceutical companies that they work with do work. So I tend to do my own investigating, my own digging a little bit here. Let's see. There's a Guardian. Let's go on. Little Mo. Biden administration withdrawing COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Can your employees still require it? So even though they're not pulling the vaccines, they're not pulling all that. I know that's been in the courts. They are pulling the mandate push that they were pushing for. But the question is still out there. Can your employer still require it? The companies with 100 or more employers will no longer be required to have employees get vaccinated, but they can still mandate it on their own terms. Yes, it's legal. They can still do it. In fact, a lot of companies are, and we'll cover that in just a second. But one of the things that I would throw out there, and I don't know how much weight it has to it, but the companies that are creating the vaccines and the boosters have been given the all clear. Okay, they have no liability if you get sick or die or have adverse reactions to it. They are in the clear. Federal government certainly isn't going to be held responsible for anything if it happens to you. But if your employer mandates that you get the vaccine, and you get the vaccine and have a side effect, or you know, I don't want to say death, but I mean, if you have something awful happen to you, who's held responsible? Well, the government's not going to be. The company that made the vaccine is not. So if your employer is telling you that they're going to mandate the vaccine, I would certainly run that by them and say, you know, if something happens to me, you guys are liable for that. So I know a lot of companies, to get around that, they are offering the testing in place of it, and some of them are providing locations, or they're providing the equipment, or telling you where you can go. And we may cover that in a little bit too. I can't remember, but I know they're giving outs to people so they don't have to get the vaccine. But one of the ones that they're giving is, obviously, they can tell you, hey, you know, don't come back, and they can do that. They have every right to do that, and that's your choice on what you want to do. Let's keep looking at it. So from American Express to Walmart, here are the companies mandating the COVID vaccines for employees, and this is still going on. One of which was Carhartt, we talked about last week, which, again, they're a private company. They can do whatever they want to do. But you see American Express, Amtrak, Anthem, BlackRock. You should look up BlackRock, by the way. We saw the article about, was it this one? Yeah, this one was the inflation increasing the interest rates. Yeah, you should look up BlackRock when you have time. All right, Carhartt, Cisco, Citigroup, goes on and on and on and on. So a lot of companies are still doing the mandates and pushing for those. And again, I would be a little leery if I were an employer, push that on my employees, because again, I think in the court of law, I would be the one held liable if something were to happen. That may not be the case, especially in our courts right now. There's no telling, but something for you to think about. And again, if you sign on the dotted line that you're going to work for somebody, you're going to do what they tell you to do, that's what you have to do. And if it's either a vaccine or get out, and that's your call, you got to do what you got to do. Look at one more right here. From CNBC, the next COVID variant will be more contagious than Omicron, but the question is whether it will be more deadly, WHO says. First of all, WHO doesn't seem to get their act together. They don't know what they're talking about half the time. And I know that's a terrible thing, but again, they have their own biases, and they're probably backed by certain sponsors, so to speak, or whatnot too. WHO official, we'll just read this real quick. Maria Van Klaar warned against theories that the virus will continue to mutate into milder strains that make people less sick than earlier variants. and that's warned against the theories of the virus. That's what viruses typically do, though. The virus will continue to evolve before it settles into a pattern, said Dr. Mike Ryan, who's director of emergency programs. Pfizer and BioNTech on Tuesday started testing a COVID vaccine that specifically targets the Omicron variant. Well, again, Omicron seems to be about on its way out. I know there's argument to be made about that, and people will say maybe that's not the case, but it kind of seems like it's on its way out, and the next variant's probably not too far behind. But if it's like most viruses, the next variant is going to be significantly less severe than even Omicron was, and Omicron was significantly less severe than Delta. But as it says here, more contagious. Well, this is all probably very, very true. The virus is probably going to continue to mutate and mutate and mutate, as viruses tend to do, and be more contagious, be less severe. And as several articles we've read before in the past say, we'll probably eventually treat this like the flu. If we do that, it may eventually, I don't want to say go away, but it could be more like a seasonal thing, or it could be maybe, it's not that big of a deal. It has to have time to work out the half-life or whatever they call it of these things. They got to process. They got to roll. And they act like this is something new. And I get that it's a pandemic. This is a new virus, so to speak. It's a version of SARS, but a virus going to virus. You can pretty much tell what viruses are going to do looking at what viruses in the past have done. Right? If we can't learn from our past, we're doomed to repeat it. This is true on various different things. And this is one right here that we can learn from the past. We can see what viruses have done before. This is not like a new thing. Like this isn't, we've never heard of a virus before. Come on. Tell them, Joe.
Come on, man.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out this clip from the Morning Mayhem. Remember, this is just a portion of the full show that comes out every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. If you hadn't already, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the full shows or these tasty little nuggets.